Scott was only 16 years old and silently walked through the city. He wasn't happy about the hot summer day, nor the flowers in the gardens, or even the sun peeking behind the clouds. For the first time in years, the boy couldn't understand how the world could live and thrive when so much sadness, injustice, and terrible tragedy had happened to him. Once, the boy had been walking the same path, holding his mother's hand. She was telling him something, and he was jumping up and down, excited. He was walking beside her, laughing joyfully, while watching some butterflies flying nearby. Scott was the same carefree and cheerful boy, holding his mother's hand. But now she was gone, leaving him alone. She abandoned me, forgot about her son, and didn't take me with her, he thought. She had passed away. Scott couldn't contain himself and wept. It seemed very childish, but he felt like a poor helpless child, lost in this big and dangerous world. Scott's mother had died 50 days ago. She was very young, only 35 years old. She had been fighting an illness, but after 2 years, she couldn't win the battle. Her name was Catherine. She spent a lot of time in the hospital, and Scott was always by her side. He loved his mother more than anyone else in the world. She was his best friend. She was so beautiful, kind, and caring. Why did such an injustice happen? She got sick, fought to overcome. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Scott broke his heart with heavy thoughts as he walked slowly along the street. He wiped away the tears and walked to the flower shop. "Oh, it's you!" The saleswoman smiled sadly at him. "Look at these beautiful roses we have today. Are you taking them?" "Yes, Miss Johnson." "I'll take those roses, please." The boy took the money out of his pocket, counted the exact amount, and dropped the coins clinking on the counter. Then he picked up the flowers, nodded to Miss Johnson, and left the store. The boy is suffering a lot. There hasn't been a day since his mother died that he hasn't gone to her grave. No matter if it's cold, raining, or windy outside, he always goes and sits by her grave, Miss Johnson said with a sigh to her co-worker, who watched the boy leaving the shop, asking, "Is he an orphan now? Are there no relatives left?" She shook her head in denial. "He has relatives, a father and a grandmother, but that doesn't make the boy's life any better. His grandmother is very old, in poor health, and his father drinks too much," Miss Johnson replied. "How do you know all this?" the co-worker asked. "My mother told me. She lives next to them. I don't know them, but my mother said they were a good family. They were poor but friendly, and when Catherine, the mother, got sick, everything got worse. They sold a car and a lot of household things to pay for her treatment, but nothing helped. Cancer is difficult. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor." "It's a shame. So sad to see the boy suffer with all this," she said sadly. "That poor boy worked as a mail delivery boy. He washed cars and cleaned the streets just to earn some money to help his mother. And now he's bringing flowers to her grave. Poor boy. He's a decent person. There aren't many like him these days." Emotionally, Miss Johnson sighed and wiped the tears from her eyes. Scott walked up to the family grave, touched the picture of his mother leaning against the tombstone, and wept once again. "Mom, I miss you so much. It only gets easier when I come to talk to you here. But please, don't worry about me. I'll be okay. But Dad started drinking a lot. Grandma cries all the time, and her heart hurts. She says you're waiting for her. I guess she doesn't want to live without you either." Scott spoke to his mother for a long time. He talked about school, remembered the time when they were still together, and knowing that no one would see him there, he let the tears flow on the flower-strewn grave. Stanley, the cemetery caretaker, watched from afar. As he heard the calm but tearful voice of the boy, he approached and shook his head. "I can't believe my eyes. He's here again. I have to do something about this. It seems like no one else can help him. It's possible to go mad from pain," Stanley thought. He walked quietly to Scott, sat on the low bench, and said, "I know how you feel. I also lost my mother when I was a child. You're a big boy now. I was only 9, Stanley murmured. "And how did you manage to live?" the boy asked seriously. "I had no one but her, so they put me in an orphanage. You have no idea how hard my life was. I went hungry and got beaten up a lot." "Why were you beaten up?" Scott asked. "Because most of the kids in the orphanage never knew their parents. They didn't know what it was like to live in a family, and I was lucky to know that. I guess they took out that frustration on me, so they beat me." Stanley sighed and asked, "What's your name?" "Scott," the boy answered softly. "That's a good name. I'm Stanley." "Who are you visiting here?" Scott asked curiously. "No one. I'm the caretaker here, keeping the place in order. Vandals have been coming here lately, destroying monuments, doing all sorts of nonsense. It's a real mess." Both fell silent, and then Stanley suggested, "Friend, listen to me. I can see that you loved your mother very much. It's good that you loved and respected her so much, but still, you need to compose yourself and move forward. Come here on her birthday a few more times a year, but you don't need to come here more often than that. Tell me, would your mother like that?" "I just miss her so much," Scott sighed. "You'll miss her for the rest of your life. There's nothing you can do about it. But you have to let her go and seek to do the best for the world and be happy, young man. May her soul rest in peace." "But what do you mean by letting her go?" the boy asked, surprised. "Just say goodbye. Write a letter, then talk to her whenever you want and ask her to help you deal with your problems and longings from the other world. But don't hold her here. Write about everything you feel, and you'll see. She will help. She will definitely help, okay?" Scott nodded. "I'll try, but I don't have a pen or paper." "No problem. I'll give you a pen and a piece of paper. Stay here and think about what you want to say to her and how you want to say goodbye," the man said and left, quickly returning with a notebook and a pen. He handed them to Scott and left again, leaving the boy alone with his thoughts. While the boy was busy writing, Stanley took a vase of roses from his booth, carried it outside the cemetery fence, and placed it on the sidewalk. Then he returned to Scott, who was already holding a letter in his hands. "So, now that you've finished writing, let's dig a little hole near the grave and put the letter there. Did you have enough time to write everything you wanted?" "Yes," said Scott, "and I asked her to help my dad stop drinking and to help my grandma get better," he said hopefully. "That's good. Now let's go. I'll accompany you," the man said, pointing to the exit. And they walked along the narrow path, talking softly. Suddenly, Scott stopped abruptly and cried out in surprise when he saw the vase of roses on the sidewalk. "But how did they get here? My mother loved them," the boy said, shocked. "I have no idea how it got here. There was certainly nothing here when I passed," Stanley lied, hiding the fact that he heard the boy before and placed the vase there. "You don't understand. My mother had the same roses, but after she died, they withered. I told her about it the other day. This seems like some kind of miracle," the boy muttered, confused. "Well, take this miracle home, and may everything be well with you. The time of sorrow will end soon, but happiness will surely find you." The boy thanked the man and left, holding the vase tightly in his hands. His grandmother and father met him at home. His grandmother had already made his favorite lasagna. She was looking better than she had in a long time, and his father went to his son, hugging him and said, "I'm sorry, son. I just haven't been myself lately. Your mom wouldn't like this. I won't drink anymore, I promise. We have to move forward, son, and we'll be okay. We're together." Scott sighed happily and hugged his father. That night, the doorbell rang. Scott opened the door and saw Mallory, the girl from the house next door, who had lived there her whole life. "Scott, I've been waiting for you, and you haven't shown up. I've been worried about you." "Actually, I've always been worried," the girl said modestly. Suddenly, she took a step forward, nestled into him, and cried. "Come on, don't cry. You and I will be fine. Everything will be okay," Scott said, feeling warmth in his chest. He stroked her hair and lifted Mallory's head. She looked into Scott's eyes and smiled. "I love you, Scott. I loved you for a long time, and I want you by my side." He leaned in and kissed the girl's cheek for the first time in his life. They had always been friends, but that moment was new for both of them. "I promise to be by your side, and I love you too, Mallory." Scott sighed softly. He embraced the love that came to him and thought that Stanley was right. The time of sorrow was almost over and was replaced by a time of peace, happiness, and love. If you know any similar story, write about it in the comments. Like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic stories.